With 2017 coming to a close later this evening, now we want to take a look back at some of the biggest stories to hit St. Louis this year. Our city has been in the national spotlight on more than one occasion over the past 12 months. One of the most memorable moments that threw St. Louis into the national spotlight was the solar eclipse. Thousands of people converged into the path of totality to see the sky go dark in the middle of the afternoon. We also saw our fair share of crazy stories like these cattle breaking out of a meat packing plant and running loose through the streets of North St. Louis for hours happened earlier this spring. There were also stories that caused a great amount of devastation and grief to those, like the massive warehouse fire in the Botanical Heights neighborhood last month. But one of the most shocking stories to hit our area was a very local connection to a massive national story. The shooter who opened fire at a congressional baseball game was from Belleville. Our Marielle Mose looks back at that story.
Paige, back on June 14th, the unthinkable happened. A man opened fire during a practice for the annual congressional baseball game. The man behind the attack was James Hodgkinson from Belleville. He was shot and killed by U.S. Capitol Police, but not before shooting 4 people, including Congressman Steve Scalise, who did not return to the Capitol for nearly 4 months. Hodgkinson's wife said she had no idea he was planning this.
I just don't know what to tell you people. I had no idea this was going to happen, and I don't know what to say about it. I can't wrap my head around it.
Prosecutors say James Hodgkinson scouted the softball field where that attack took place for weeks. He fired 62 rounds during the attack. Capitol Police fired 40 rounds before killing him. Another story that grabbed the attention of St. Louisans for weeks is the Jason Stockley trial and resulting protests. Stockley is a former St. Louis police officer. He was accused of killing Anthony Lamar Smith back in 2011. In September of this year, a judge found him not guilty. Some of the protests that followed turned violent. Some protesters shattered windows in the Del Mar Loop, Central West End, and downtown St. Louis over the course of about a week. Majority of the protests were peaceful, though. Their message continues to be no justice, no profit, focusing on shutting down businesses, especially in malls. And right in the middle of the Jason Stockley protests, a bizarre and scary robbery happened at the Casino Queen in East St. Louis. 3 men entered the casino with long rifles, robbed the cash cage, and shot a security guard. That shot sent people inside the casino running for cover. At last check, Crime Stoppers was still offering a reward for information leading to an arrest. That security guard did survive. And as we continue to look back at 2017, we go back to April. You may remember a double murder-suicide in North St. Louis. The 2 victims worked for Laclede Gas and were working on Minerva. The suspect came up, approached them with his gun drawn, and the 2 workers pleaded with him before he opened fire. Both workers died from their injuries. The suspect then turned the gun on himself. That suspect did have unpaid bills to both Ameren and Laclede Gas. Injured Arnold officer Ryan O'Connor continues to recover in a hospital. On Friday, the police department says he's slowly getting off some medication. It was earlier this month that a robbery suspect shot Officer O'Connor in the back of the head while inside his police cruiser. The suspects later died of what appears to be a self-inflicted gunshot wound. And it's no doubt 2017 has been a terrible year of crime in the St. Louis area. Police have also seen their fair share of action when it comes to chasing suspects. Paige takes a look back at the most memorable chases of this year.
Well, it was just about a week and a half ago that a carjacking suspect took police on a multi-state chase. The suspect weaved his way through traffic during rush hour on Interstate 70 and actually hit another car near the end of the depressed section. But the chase didn't end there. He took police the wrong way on city streets and eventually hit a light pole near Harris-Stowe University, where he was arrested. Fortunately, no one was hurt. Now, that was not the case back in April when police pursued an SUV that was involved in a carjacking. That chase approached Lambert Airport, where the suspect crashed into a family's car, a family just getting back from vacation. 9-year-old Caleb Lee died from his injuries. His 5-year-old brother, mom, and aunt were also injured in that crash. 3 teens were arrested at the scene. You may remember another deadly police chase ended in a standoff on Interstate 55 near Crystal City back in July. The suspect, also wanted for a carjacking, got out of his vehicle when he crashed near US 61, nearly 15 miles away from where that chase started. Then he started shooting at police. Officers fired back. That's when the suspect got back in the car and the SWAT team moved in. Officers eventually found the suspect dead. No officers were hurt.
And 2017 also had several tragic car accidents happen. Just 2 days before Thanksgiving, a semi slammed into 7 cars near Hamel, Illinois, killing 4 people, including the Bertels sisters from Staunton, Illinois. The driver of that semi was from Colorado and has not been charged. ISP is still looking for his cell phone. And just 3 weeks later, and about 10 miles south of Interstate 55, a 62-year-old woman was killed when another semi plowed through several cars. The driver of that semi-truck looked away from the road to take a drink. After that crash, ISP won a grant to crack down on distracted and drunk driving. Then there was this, a car landing on the roof of a house back in July. The car was apparently speeding down Mimica in North St. Louis. When it hit the curb, it went flying into the air, landing on the roof of a house.
I'm safe. I'm alive. I'm safe. My health is good, so I'm okay.
Good attitude there. Believe it or not, this was the second time a car had ran into that homeowner's house.
If there's one story that so many people remember from 2017, it's the massive 5-alarm warehouse fire in South St. Louis. This fire burned for more than 24 hours, and 5 days later, there was still smoke billowing up from the rubble. Investigators are still trying to determine what caused the fire. Another massive fire destroyed a popular country club in St. Charles County this year. Back in February, the Bogey Hills Country Club burned to the ground. The fire was deemed accidental. The family broke ground on a new clubhouse back in August. Firefighters also dealt with some things they've probably never seen before, like the boiler explosion at the Loy Lang Box Company back in April. Surveillance video captured the moment the boiler exploded and flew hundreds of feet into the air. It took 11 seconds before the boiler crashed through the roof of the Faultless Linen Building. 3 people were killed in the tragedy. That same month, city firefighters dealt with this horrific home explosion in the Beta neighborhood in North St. Louis. No one was living in the home, and thankfully no one was hurt, but the next-door neighbor's house was condemned, and she had to move out.
And the weather also caused a lot of grief in 2017. In March, an EF3 tornado hit the town of Perryville, Missouri. Nearly 200 homes were damaged or leveled. The National Weather Service says the path of the tornado was about 15 miles long. 1 person was killed in that storm. And closer to St. Louis, hundreds of families were affected by spring flood of 2017. The rising rivers and seemingly never-ending rain caused Missouri an estimated $86 million worth of damage. 141 in Valley Park was covered in water for about a week, and the town of Eureka showed up in a big way to help sandbag their downtown district. And as Paige mentioned earlier, the solar eclipse still stands out as one of the biggest events here in St. Louis, not just this year, but really in the last century. It was summed up perfectly by our own Matt Chambers.
We made it! I can't believe what I just saw. We made it to totality.
I love his enthusiasm. If you were able to watch the eclipse, you weren't alone. More than 88% of the adult population watched the eclipse live or on TV.
That was amazing to see.
It really was. It's so beautiful.
And finally, the moments that just got everyone talking in 2017. There were a few of them, but we've narrowed down our top 2.
The first is these guys, the cattle that were running loose through the streets of North St. Louis for hours. One of those animals was actually named Chico. A huge fight ensued over who would keep the cattle. Chico and his friends are now living at Gentle Barn, located in Dittmer, Missouri.
And last but not least, who could forget the most popular cat in St. Louis?
My favorite story, we're talking about Rally Cat and its famous run across Busch Stadium.
He doesn't like that.
And once the cat bit the groundskeeper a couple of times, Yadier Molina hoisted the very next pitch over the left field wall for a grand slam.
What a great ending to that game. And those are some of the biggest stories of 2017 that impacted us right here in St. Louis.